Hey everyone, Temporal here, and for this video we are going to be covering the news. Specifically, we are looking at some news on these two sites about how Dell and in theory other companies aren't going to be shipping high energy requirement PCs to certain states. These states are included in the title, but they are California, Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. Because regulation has been passed, these states aren't going to allow these. Now, there's ways around this, and these requirements do evolve over time in terms of going down in terms of the requirements. We do have two sources here. The better source is for sure going to be, or the better source does look like the registers here in terms of their coverage. I have read through both of them, but we are going to stop with the GameSpot one here as it's a pretty quick read, and perhaps a little more fitting. They've got a gamer focus there. So let's start here. We're gonna read through it. I'll make comments as we go. I'll respond to what you guys have in the comments there, and then we'll go through this one as well. And I'll obviously give you guys my thoughts in terms of, hey, is this a good move, a bad move? Obviously they mean well. They're thinking about energy crisis, things like that. But does gaming make sense as the industry to regulate versus other things? What does this have in terms of impact on other things that use these PCs, not just the players themselves, but like animators in the movie industry, which is something California has that you'd certainly want to be aware of. Is it going to limit innovation? That kind of thing. Okay. First comment, did a boomer think this is a good idea? Fair, fair. Okay, so starting with our GameStop piece here, Dell won't ship certain gaming PCs to states like California due to energy regulations. Due to regulations that recently went into effect, Dell won't ship some of its power-hungry gaming PCs to certain states because of how much energy they require. According to the company's website, via this other source that we'll go to, PCs like Alienware and the Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition R10 gaming desktop won't ship to California, Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Vermont, or Washington because states won't allow them. Yes, I'm aware those aren't all Western states, but primarily we're looking at Western states there. So that's what I did here because the other option was just take a shot at California. And while California certainly deserves to have some shots taken at it, this isn't just a California problem. So here we have this product cannot be shipped to the states that we just listed due to power consumption regulations adopted by those states. The site states before customization. So any sort of customization, even if you try to have them build it for you and send it to you, even if you're like switch out this piece and this piece, it won't let you if your power consumption is too high. And then they gave us an example of one that is here. Now, this isn't an amazing computer based on everything I understand. Alienware hasn't been making great gaming computers for a while, would generally be the consensus. I haven't ever had an Alienware, so perhaps I'm not the one to say that, but my general understanding of the consensus among gamers is that, hey, you're paying too much for not enough value there. And that's true in general when you get into like laptop gaming, which they tried to do too much of, but even if this affects only one computer right now, or not only one, even if this only affects some bad computers right now, the problem is we don't know like what this stops from being developed. Like even if this is like, hey, there's only a few computers that it impacts right now, these aren't very good computers, there's better alternatives. If the law stays on the books and the law and the regulation doesn't time out, what you run into is, okay, well, what does this do in terms of stopping future computers that'll just never get made that would have been amazing computers because they're not even going to be put into R&D, into development, even figured out or approached because this regulation exists, and manufacturers do not want to give up this big of a market share to ignore them. Like, going, yeah, we're going to make computers that can't be sold in these areas, just not going to be a thing. Okay, so here we go. We will continue. Uh, California, of particular, it was the first to approve it, so it was the market mover there in December 2016. Didn't take effect until January 1st. PCs built between then and July 21st must use no more than this per year, 50, 80, or 100 kilowatts per year for expandability scores ES of less than 250. 251 to 425 and 425 to 690 respectively. This period marks the Tier 1 requirements, but now we're entering Tier 2 here. Anything assembled after July 1st, 2021 must follow Tier 2 restrictions, consume no more than 50, 60, 75 kilowatts per hour per year for the same ES score. So we see these restrictions are tightening. It used to be 50, 80, 100. Now it's 50, 60, 75. And some computers are falling into this tightened area. This space between this 100 and this 75 is tripping up some computers. I think we might actually even have something tripped up by the 80 there versus 60, but we are seeing that, and that, maybe it's only a few computers that are affected now, but what's not being developed in the future because of this here would be the concern. According to product description, the Alienware thing we've talked about idles at too high of a rate. That's above the 60 here, and uses 563 when stressed. That's way too high. Not going to work. Okay. The expandability score comprises of 4 non-active usage modes: short idle, long idle, sleep, and off modes. This score is also based on the number and type of interfaces, as well as additional power requirements from add-ons like graphics cards, high bandwidth system memory, and the like. Okay. The Natural Resource Defense Council, an environmental advocacy nonprofit, projected in December 2016 the new California standard would save more than 2.3 billion kilowatt hours of electricity a year. Okay, well, if it is actually saving this, this means people are either using worse computers, using more efficient computers. If they're using more efficient computers, that might be okay. But frequently what happens when things are happening, is you go build a bad version of something, or you go build a power-hungry version of something, and then afterwards you're able to build a more efficient version of something. But this one also comes first. And we would be worried, is this one just not going to come into existence, which causes this one to never exist because the requirement was to do this one first, because you had to upgrade your performance without upgrading your energy take. Even if this doesn't get widely used, this coming into existence is very useful for how innovation happens. Again, would be my concern here. So either people are using worse computers or they're moving to more efficient computers, which is fine that they're moving to more efficient computers. But this, as far as I know, doesn't have any exception for, but how are we going to break through? And even if it does have some exception for new innovation, it would be for a very limited number of use, which you won't enter from a market standpoint. You're not going to get the return on your investment in the R&D of developing that thing. Okay, so this is clearly expected to actually have an impact, not just be some, let's not go way out into the space in the future. And we already see there is computers it's affecting here. Okay. Equivalent to annual electricity use by all the houses in San Francisco, and avoids 730,000 tons of climate disrupting carbon pollution from fossil fuel fired power plants. Okay. Other states have adopted similar standards, and we saw which states those were. In a statement to the registrar, Dell confirmed that the Alienware Aurora R10 and R12 were the only systems impacted across Dell and Alienware. Okay, but that's 2 companies, and that's right now. So we know there's at least 2, and that's not really 2 companies, it's ownership there. That's one effectively distributor seller that's doing that. Are there others, would be my question. And even if there aren't, are we capping things out for, hey, we put this regulation that's on the books, either doesn't have an out clause or will probably get renewed forever, because unfortunately that's frequently what we do with laws, and it's sort of hitting a cap end issue there, at least until lobbyists, maybe from like Disney, who want to do animation, who would like a ton of energy to be available for them to use on even a very dirty computer, even a computer that's very inefficient, and you want just as much power as you can when you're doing that kind of stuff. And that is where we're getting, by the way, with some of the highest of high-end graphic cards, for example. Yes, they're going to Bitcoin mining. Yes, they're in some ways going to gaming PCs, but we're pretty there with gaming PCs. Most of the like highest of high-end stuff is actually going into animation, like making animation, which it actually matters for, and that would be a concern there. This was driven by the California Energy Commission Tier 2 implementation that defines a mandatory energy efficiency standard for PCs, including desktops, AIOs, and mobile gaming system, the spokesperson said. It was put into effect on July 1st. We know that. Select configurations were the only ones across Dell and Alienware. Fine. It is unclear if regulations in the six aforementioned state with the PC will affect other PC manufacturers. Right, so there may be more out there. We don't know yet. And Acer told the registrar it was looking into the situation. Well, HP did not respond to a request for comment. We'll look at these guys' comments, but before we go further, I'm going to take us over here because these guys did a slightly better job with this. It's a longer read, but these guys did a slightly better job with this. So I'm going to go in here. I'll skip through it a little more, but let's do this. So here we have it. This is mostly the same information, cannot be shipped to these places. It was driven originally by the California Energy Commission's Tier 2 implementation. And then we have a bit more of editorializing here, but this is interesting editorializing. Such concern about energy efficiency appears to be appropriate given the findings of a 2015 Semiconductor Industry Association report PDF that gives a benchmark of systems of 10 to the negative 14th joules per bit transition. Computing will not be sustainable by 2040 when energy production for computing will exceed the estimated world's energy production. So the idea here, and I'll go a bit further before I show you guys the graph. Current processors are at 1017 Jbit, which is the SIA considers to be a workable target for more efficient energy computing, though the group said in a more recent report, revolutionary changes to computing will be required soon. Okay, so here's the real thing right here. The total energy consumption by general purpose computing tends to grow exponentially and is doubling approximately every 3 years, while the world's energy production is growing only linearly by 2% per year. So here we have some things. Going on. So where do I want to start with this? Here's the graph. I pulled out the graph, a zoomed out version. I also used it as part of the thumbnail. You guys can see the graph here. The world's energy production looks like it's flatlining or maybe even going down a bit. They told us it was going up about 2% per year. They show us that the rate that the rate that energy usage is increasing at would in theory pass that by 2040. That's a problem. What are we ever going to do? I have some issues with this, and there's two real issues that immediately strike me for this. One of which is this strikes me a lot like peak oil, and you haven't all lived through this, but I lived through the scares of, there's going to be peak oil in like 2007 or 2004 or 2009 of like, it's going to take more energy from the oil. It's going to cost us more oil from like the cost of the oil, the energy we get off of burning oil. It's going to take more oil to get oil out of the ground than we get oil out of the ground for using the oil. And if that person, it doesn't make sense, and it's peak oil, and it's just not going to work, and everything is absolutely going to have to change because the energy just won't be there. We won't be able to do what we're doing. And guess what? It never happened. We got told again and again it was going to happen, that the energy just wasn't there, that we weren't going to be able to do it, and it didn't actually happen. And the reason for this is, of course, innovation happened, development happened. We got better, we got more efficient at doing these things because the innovation required it. There was a profit motive there, and of course we did these things. Now, some bad things happened as a result of this. It's like, fracking. Fracking got popular, fracking started happening. That met a lot of energy needs, and that has a lot of bad side effects that people don't like, and I totally understand that. I'm not claiming that it is some wonderful thing. It's not. But again, I take that as an example of like peak oil was supposed to be this like the end of energy. We won't be able to do it anymore. It's just not going to work type thing. And we were supposed to hit it, and then we were supposed to hit it, and then we were supposed to hit it, and we didn't. So like that's not really working for me. This like, it's not going to work. No, in innovation, it's like, it's been 2% per year. For how many years? Because the way innovation happens is in bursts like this. Like it might be generally slowly going up, and then it hits a spike, and then it sort of flatlines for a while, and then it hits a spike. Like that's how innovation works. So I'm objecting to this, and I'm kind of saying nonsense to this in the first place. And the other thing that I get to here is, but the total energy consumption by general purpose computing continues to grow exponentially and is doubling approximately every 3 years. Is it doubling every 3 years because we have a large number of countries and people that are going through modernization, that are moving into, hey, now they are doing computer jobs? We have India taking over a lot of call center jobs. We have India taking over a lot of jobs where it's like, hey, they're using computers. They now have cell phones where they didn't, in the not so distant past. So, like, that's a huge percentage of the world population that we're going, oh, hey, that's happening. Well, that won't continue forever. That happened. Like, that happened to some of the biggest countries in the world already. When we're talking about China, when we're talking about India, like, that happened. So, no, we don't expect that to continue forever. Now, this would be more interesting if it was tied to, like, the growth rates. If you showed me the model and it's like, this is why we expect it to continue to happen at this rate. But from what I'm seeing here, this sort of looks like we're cherry picking this important period of time when very explainable events happened that increased our energy consumption. And once we get our energy consumption up, once they actually finish getting it up there, there's no reason to expect that it's going to continue to double every 3 years like that. Like, no, those are very understandable and explainable events. Do I know 100% that they didn't go factor these things in? I don't. I am not digging super, super deep to find this because it's just not important enough to me. But this looks like ill-advised sort of cherry picking of data right here. Other interesting things here. California became the first to approve. Natural Resource Defense Council at the time, it projected it'll save more than 2.3 billion. They stole that for the GameSpot one, so we're not too worried about that. Tier 1, Tier 2. At the time, staff was unaware of vendors not shipping to California as a result of the Tier 2 requirement taking place. So basically, Dell's the only one who's actually looked. No one else was even aware of these requirements, is what I'm actually getting from this. Or maybe they checked and there was nothing there. Okay, and this gives us a little more detail. I linked both of these articles in the description below, but it gives us a little more detail than we got from the GameStop article of sort of how these are calculated type thing. So you can see it here. So I'm going to go ahead and now get into comments. If you guys just wanted the news has been read, but now I'll interact with chat. I'll read your guys' comments, see what you guys think, and then depending on how we're doing, if it feels like we've covered the topic exhaustively or not, we can get into some of the comments left by these guys on these two things, on these two articles here. But let's catch up here. So Val says, did boomers think this is a good idea? Apparently someone did. Crunch says, everybody in the Western states with high energy gaming PCs clicking power saver in Windows. So I should be clear, Crunch. Like, I don't want to be too alarmist. This basically affects pre-builds or customizations that you have the manufacturers do. If you build your own PC, you get around this because currently these things aren't impacting you. If you go, I'm going to buy this power supply, I'm going to buy this graphics card, I'm going to buy this case, I'm going to buy this motherboard, I'm going to buy these SSDs, I'm going to buy this processor. If you put it together yourself and you order the parts independently, that's not going to impact you. But this, in theory, would affect mobile gaming things like phones, perhaps. It would also affect consoles, and no one's putting together their own consoles. So it's like, oh, here's a cap for future generations of console. Well, that's a bit of a problem, and it would impact pre-built computers, which is what is happening for people who, aren't PC enthusiasts, we'll say. Pre-builts have actually gotten more popular as of late. The costs for pre-builts have sort of the delta that you used to get for putting together your own PC versus getting a pre-built has decreased. You still get a better PC if you put it together yourself, but there's places where that's decreased, especially because of graphics card shortages, where graphics cards are sort of getting like suppliers are able to lock, or buyers are able to lock it in because they know how many they're going to need for their pre-built, so it's a little more nebulous for the individual stuff. So that delta has shrunk a little bit. But yes, there is a way around this, Crunch. Perhaps people in these states should be worried, but if they really want the way around it, it does exist. And Joshua had that question. Does this apply to custom-built PCs? No. If this goes through and sticks for a year or more, I wonder if companies will try to focus on power efficiency for the sake of being able to ship to the Western states. They would, yes. They would, but again, the way development tends to happen is you go sort of make a product more powerful, and then you figure out how to make it more efficient, is usually what happens. And being like, no, we're not able to release the powerful one to market, that can't happen, sort of takes away a lot of your drive to build the more powerful thing in the first place. It's a bad market incentive. Legal loophole, make a PC using 2 cases and 2 power supplies. There you go. Their monitors are fire though. You mean Alienware? Fair. Okay, every gamer make sure their energy stays 1 watt under the limit so the FBI doesn't burst down their door. Well, it wouldn't be FBI because this isn't federal. Even though it's interstate commerce stuff, this isn't federal. This is specific states that have gone this way. I'm sure some large television uses more power than the computers they're talking about. I'm not. Well, there could be. There could be some really inefficient TVs, but we've mostly gotten pretty efficient with our TVs because our TVs have sort of gotten, like I was talking about with graphics, to a point where not graphics in general, but some of the rendering stuff. TVs had a thing. TVs did this, where you had some of the early plasma stuff that was not very energy efficient. It was, like, hey, this is kind of expensive. This has lots of issues, and that, hey, you can burn the screen in certain ways. We don't like that. But the tech quickly followed to get better TVs that were, didn't have, oh, your screen is going to freeze with this, image here and it's going to be stained, and were more energy efficient. We quickly got there. But the dirty thing came through first. The thing that's like, oh, this is energy inefficient. This has problems, but it's more powerful. It's better. That's exactly what happened. Now on TVs, we're sort of in a place where, TVs are, how do I want to put this? Like, we're going, like, we're moving from 4K to 8K, and we're mostly in the who cares. It's like, oh, 8K is twice as good as 4K. No, 8K is actually 4 times as good as 4K, but again, no one cares. We could already see the pores on actors' faces on things recorded in 4K, and we didn't really need that. But hey, there's not nearly as much excitement in the market around 8K compared to what was 4K. Oh, sure, but I wonder if there's more large TVs and stuff compared to energy computers. The AC uses way more power too. Yes, it does. Do not try living in the many parts of the West, though. Hint, it's a desert without AC. True, you guys need to go the British way and just sell like 100 fans per household. The industry will go wild. Your gaming PC is banned. Too dangerous for society. Okay. Uh, I'm not going to read that. I'm not American, but love laughing at the dumb stuff American politicians do. Would you like me to start making fun of the British laws and regulations? Like, I'm not sure you want to throw that. I'm not sure you want to lob that destructive force too hard over here at America, because America certainly does some silly stuff, but the world does some silly stuff. Like, we can go pick at some of the laws in the UK. Those will not be fun. Hey kid, looking for a good power supply? Is it under your trench coat? Animators truly are the most hated people in the world. I don't think so. Uh, uh, Keenan Barbie says, "Hey Temporal, what are your thoughts on crypto mining?" I don't particularly have an issue with it. Like, yeah, you do get into a thing where it's a lot of energy that's being used, and it's not great that it's a lot of energy that is being used to accomplish something that isn't really accomplishing something. It's basically solving a puzzle that didn't have to be set up that way. So, like, I have things where it's like, that's not great. We probably could have saw that was going to not be great and come up with some other way to let coins be mined to still choke out, to still slow down when coins come out, and be like, hey, they're going to come out over time. We could have just sort of had that happen in some other way, I would like to think, but I'm not too worried, because most of the stuff where mining ends up happening is where, like, if you seriously get into mining, or you're a company that's built to do mining, what you end up doing is you set up your mining basically on top of the energy production. And if you understand how energy works, how it scales up and scales down, and how much energy it takes to move the energy across the power lines, you understand that it is pretty darn energy efficient to do your mining in the power plant. So if you go, hey, in the power plant, we're going to do a bunch of this stuff. Yes, it's taking energy. Yes, it's an energy drain. Yes, it's a problem. But, like, the people who are most efficiently doing this basically are in places where they're on top of the power plant. Now, there's certainly people who are doing, hey, they're doing mining on the side. They have systems set up mining. And yes, those are taxing a fair amount of energy. And these are taxing a fair amount of energy with the scale that they're doing it at. And they're taxing a fair amount of energy to produce these things that aren't actually producing anything for the economy, and that's not particularly good. They're not making anyone's quality of life better. existence of the coins themselves, the existence of the system perhaps makes people's lives better, but the actual mining isn't making people's lives better. It was just like this was the puzzle that they chose to do it. And it would have probably been better if another way had been chosen, but I understand why, and this is a reasonable gating, so I'm not like, oh my god, this is terrible. But I would be interested in other people's thoughts on that topic for sure. I could be persuaded on that, I think. I mean, unless I'm reading this graph wrong, isn't this just delaying the inevitable? I mean, I think I told you why, Crunch. The graph is wrong, is my take. Yeah, they keep saying it's running out. Yeah, Adam's familiar with that. If the graph is right, if computers are going to obliterate all of the world's energy supply, the target line is still going to go over the world's energy limit. I know how this sounds, but invest more in energy or something. There's an idea. There's an idea. Oh, Val, okay, coming in here with fusion power is a big thing in EU. World energy production will go up. They are clearly cherry picking their data to support their case. Yes. I would very much be a fan of more fusion power there. Like that's a power source that is the correct power source for the future, but there's there's always a reason not to like it. The last time the U.S. got anywhere near it was presidential debates, where it was sort of a differing issue between Obama and the opponent he was running against. Like it was sort of like, okay, let's find more issues for them to differentiate on. But then while they were starting to go that route and while it was getting a little bit of mainstream traction in terms of on top of America, top of mind, Japan had their failure due to the what they were rated to withstand a stage 8 tsunami and they got like a stage 10 tsunami or something like that, and that happened. And that's more than a decade ago at this point, so perhaps the world is ready again, or America at least is ready again to go back more in that direction. But then we have issues where we have a certain state where there was a certain town that agreed to be like, oh, yeah, you can store the nuclear waste here. It's totally fine to store that here. That's fine. Go store it under these mountains. That's fine. But a certain powerful representative to the House who comes from that state doesn't really represent that area, but came to that state, said, no, you can't make our state the nuclear toilet of the country. So now we have this issue where way too many of our plants are just sort of storing their nuclear waste at the plants, which was never what they were supposed to do. They were all built to have very limited amount of waste there and then ship it somewhere else. But we've tied that up with like a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard stuff, or well, the waste can't be here. Well, the waste can't be here. Well, the waste can't be here. And we did find a place that the waste could go, but then someone decided it would be a good political issue for them to tackle to go, not here. Probably not because they really cared about it, but because they thought it would be a good political issue for points. So America has some problems on that type of thing. Um, if this is going to happen and Overwatch players are about to cripple the normal grid of every country, why not invest in more energy? Indian tech support scans turn off the entire power grid after calling everyone in the world saying, hello, your computer is a virus. I don't quite think that's how it works. France gets 70% of their power from nuclear. The largest fusion reactor is meant to be finished by 2025. Yeah, it gets a little more complicated with insurance. Because France is a little more willing to go, hey, the government owns and controls this than the U.S. is for most things. The U.S. privatizes most of its power. It can be fairly public with like water companies, utilities like that, but it's privatized most power. And if you're in the private world, how do you ensure a meltdown? How do you ensure against a meltdown? And I don't mean like how do you make sure a meltdown doesn't happen, though that's very important. I mean like what sort of insurance do you have to get against a meltdown and who's willing to underwrite that insurance? It kind of has to be one of those like, well, how do you calculate that? Who can scale that appropriately as an insurance company to cover the potential costs and damages that that a private company has to pay out if they do that? And because of that, it probably has to end up being run by the federal government because that's really all that could do it. That's really the only one who could say, well, forget it. We're just only going to write out this much because let's face it, that's what governments do. But I don't know how much appetite Americans have for that and I don't know how much appetite big business has for that because that would be, hey, Chevron, Exxon, all these companies that are used to making a bunch of energy a bunch of money off of selling energy to Americans are going to go, wait, we're fighting this competition, and it's competition that we can't even get into. We can't even move over to it ourselves and go, well, we're going to do it. We're going to replace ourselves. It's something that you'd mostly probably have to have the federal government do, which isn't interesting. So, of course, you would lobby hard against that. And you guys have a good enough idea of how lobbying works to know why that's unlikely. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So the truth isn't important to temporal. So the truth isn't important to temporal. Was that in reference to me not digging deep into this graph? I feel like I dug into this story enough, guys. Like, I could go deeper into it. It's annoying, but I don't think this is something that's like, oh, let me go write a thesis on this level of importance. This is happening, and I think you guys should be aware of it. I knew he was a charlatan. It's too hard to regulate that. I'm sure if they could, they would regulate PC building piece by piece. Right, too hard to regulate. I'm sure one day they will. Maybe. Nebula sounds like a word charlatan uses. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Our resident troll. We appreciate him. Is it hurt China? No, that's not what's going on. Make fun of the British temporal, please. uh, temporal covering House of Commons, just every video being monkey sounds and shouts of order. Well, stands up. Order, order. You don't mind. You mock the British government too. Fair enough. You and Val will enjoy some British bullying. It does happen in other ways. Ethereum 2.0 is really energy efficient, for example. Yep. It is unfair to compare reactors using older tech. No one talks about the new reactors that are way safer. Sure, but shutting down old reactors and dealing with old reactors can be a bit of a problem too, and your new reactors are going to be old and worse than the new ones at some point. And what do you do about them? Like, it can be done, you can do structured shutdowns, but it's not a nothing problem. I think I've been relatively fair to both sides of this equation. I think, nuclear power is the right answer, but I think I've listed some of the structural reasons that that's not likely to happen in the US in the short term. Here's the nuclear meltdown insurance. We have the Chernobyl package and the Fukushima package on special offer. I hear you, but you can't possibly have enough people paying into that crunch to like make that make sense. We're like, how are you going to underwrite the size of that disaster when you would need like multiple ones that you're insured? It becomes a mess because like the idea of insurance is you're supposed to spread risk out over time, and it's like, okay, this is happening, we've spread it out over time, we can absorb it, and like you're not going to be able to get enough capital together as anything but the federal or maybe certain state governments to be like, we have enough capital that if something goes wrong in year 1, we can cover it. You might be able to do it like if something goes wrong in year 15 because hey, now enough has been paid in that it can be covered, etc. But like you would have to be like, nothing is going wrong on all the other products that we're insuring, the cars that we're insuring, the health that we're insuring, like to have enough money that you're just holding on hand that doesn't make more sense to be deploying elsewhere in other investments. They will just use the Simpsons emergency plan, just move the whole town 10 miles. It might not be enough. Imagine being the guy going to a power plant trying to sell their insurance. That's got to be a surreal job. Okay. So Americans refuse to switch to fusion power because oil companies lose profit. Well, specific Americans that work at the Capitol, in general, I don't think Americans refuse to switch to fusion because oil companies lose profit. I think they choose to do that because, they have been scared in some ways reasonably, in some ways not reasonably, about the dangers of nuclear power, but lobbying is a big thing. Lobbyists sometimes talk to regular people. We call those advertising campaigns, but most of the time lobbyists are talking to congressmen, senators, etc. Okay. Okay. While oil is abundant also, there is no real imperative to swap, and it's a lot less politically controversial than building a nuclear reactor. Yeah, it's a lot less politically controversial. Americans don't want to use oil for power and typically don't. It's usually coal and natural gas as alternatives since both are plentiful. The green direction is solar and wind. Yeah. The problems that we run into with solar and wind, though, is when demand versus production. Like storing energy is energy expensive, battery technology is very bad, but for solar and wind to be serious long-term viable solutions, our battery technology would probably have to go forward, I don't know, somewhere to 4 to 7 generations of battery technology before that really makes sense, because storing power is power expensive right now, doesn't work very well. Then you have to deal with the waste of the batteries because batteries don't last forever and they're pretty toxic. Like this isn't amazing, unfortunately, because again, it's not always, the wind isn't always coming in at the level that you need to sustain power, because power sustain, like the way that we use power differs. The needs of the power grid change over time, and the needs of the power grid when you're burning oil, when you're burning coal, when you're burning um, natural gas, those you can just burn more or less to meet the needs of the going up and down power needs. When it's wind, well, you only have as much power as there is wind, and you can substitute that by going, oh no, we've stored some time when it was more windy into a battery that we can now pull from when it's less windy to meet these power needs. But that, again, there's issues with the battery technology right now, and we would have similar things with solar. Um, If you're the CEO of an energy company, send your reply to temporal. Okay, okay. Current and all prior generations of wind are terrible. Yeah, yeah. Chernobyl VOD review when? Uh, the more I looked into solar and wind, the more I realized it's a big meme except in certain circumstances. Basically, only viable clean energy is nuclear. Currently, I think that's mostly true. Yeah. Yeah. Like the clean energy that works, that is viable, American politicians at least don't want. And I say American politicians, I think Americans are somewhat split on the issue, but what matters really, unfortunately, is the politicians, and the politicians are lobbied very hard by, you know, oil, natural gas, etc. companies. Okay. Don't you dare melt down. You're on low ground. Get on high ground, then melt down. No, we want to have it low ground to contain. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Uh, Solar and wind sound really good, but you don't need like at least 500 AA batteries to. But don't you need like at least 500 AA batteries to hold your energy power? Everyone while winter sun is low. Well, you don't use AA batteries, but yes, yes. They should put the wind turbines in the House of Congress. There's lots of fun. You're right, Blah. That would solve everything. That would solve everything. So they should put the wind turbines in Congress. There's lots of hot air blowing around in there constantly. Okay. You'd only need to throw 17 cats into a black hole to power Norway for a year. Okay. Okay. I'm having fun. I think you guys are having fun. Let's hop into some of the comments here and see if there's educated and interesting comments here. Again, there's less comments here, so we'll start with this one. California is known for ridiculous regulations, but I wonder about the power consumption of a machine that's barred from this many states. I mean, could be, but I think there's also some follow the leader stuff going on where California gets to lead on a lot of things. California hates. Alienware's PCs are a complete ripoff, more or less doing them a favor. Right, but we don't really know if this applies to other machines that aren't from Alienware or Dell, and we also don't know what this will do to the future in terms of, we see the rates have been going down in terms of what they're allowed to do. And well, I'm not saying that they're going to tear down again. I am saying like that could be an issue for machines 4 years from now. 5 years from now. That could change the direction that machines are developed in a way that's not great because you could be weakening the strength of machines. Again, you might want to make your machines more efficient, but you can make your machines more efficient by going, hey, if your machine is taking tons of energy, that's costing you money. So, yes, you would like a cheaper machine, and there you have a force that's driving it to be cheaper. And you won't buy the machine that costs a ton of energy if energy is costing you too much money. But if you're, say, an animator, say you work at Pixar, say you work at, something like that, you go, oh, Studio Ghibli, whatever, you go, okay, hey, we're going to go do this, and that's going to be a case of we are willing to pay that because it makes sense. The return on that is good, and it allows us to push the envelope with new stuff, with things like that. Or, hey, this is a huge virtual reality, I don't know, video game virtual reality auditorium or something that like people pay to come to, and like this is a new thing that we could do that like, hey, people attend this place and it's got VR and it's awesome, but that doesn't happen because the energy requirements are a problem. This is the sort of thing where you don't even know the ideas that you're choking out of existence with this. State of hypocrisies. Gut people's video games, but then allow hundreds of okay, that's immigration comments. It's immigration comment that isn't even necessarily accurate. America's energy infrastructure is about 50 years out of date. Might want to change that before releasing a barrage of technology onto, well, most places of America. Yeah, I mean, that's why infrastructure is generally a bipartisan issue in American politics, where like everyone agrees, yes, upgrade infrastructure, and yes, they do include internet and infrastructure, but they don't include everything in infrastructure. That is changing definitions cause fights. We'll just say. Uh, Next will be your AC units and big screen TVs. No, the West isn't giving up their AC units. Again, too much of the West. Southern California is a desert. It's been conquered by AC, but Southern California is a desert. Same thing with Arizona. Same thing, though Arizona wasn't on the list. Yeah. This is just more saying Alienware is bad. Anything interesting here? I'd expect rules and regulations like these from places like my parents' home country, Libya, where blackouts are as common as sand, but not from a vibrant American state like California. Is it really that bad over there? The answer to that is no. This is clearly a preemptive thing, preparing for 2040 and assuming our energy use rate is going to continue climbing at a rate that has specific reasons it's climbing at this rate, and that our efficiency and that our efficiency of increasing our energy capabilities aren't going to increase at all. So like, no, it's not remotely this bad here. But this is not a reasonable comparison, but an interesting take. Okay. Water is a serious problem in the western states. I don't see anything too interesting here. Okay. And then they're talking about kids versus that. So let's check comments on this one. Do we get more interesting with our comments here? It's interesting that consumers are not allowed to have powerful computers, but at the same time, companies are pushing adverts online, are not required to deliver it in such a way to minimize power consumption. Fair point. Um, And that will be a question. Will things like animators get it where they go, hey, we're going to lobby to get an exemption made for this? But again, even if you do that, it's not good because the small startup can't fight their way in like that. And also, the new technology, the new industry that people didn't even realize would exist isn't able to take advantage of that. So like again, that's not the best solution. Mhm. Another law written by Intel to try to push its frankly god-awful gaming XG cards slower than GeForce 560, released in 2011, low power and incapable of that. Could be. I don't know. They don't publish, unfortunately. They don't have those NASCAR race car jackets that show us who the sponsors are and which lobbyists wrote the laws, unfortunately. Hmm. You guys are more interesting than the comments here. You guys are much more interesting than the comments here. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay, so let's just go back here to our comments, see if they're more interesting, and then we can wrap up. Okay. That's a great point he makes. So the other states will have a gaming advantage and can hit higher FPS than CA gamers. Yeah, no, and that is a thing that happens. Like a state that has Silicon Valley in it and has Hollywood in it thought this was a good idea. That's like screaming at your industry to go, you should go somewhere else. Like that is not wise because those are two industries who both would potentially be like, our computers are energy hogs. Don't live in California, Bronze, right? Ouch, ouch. The downside is Temporal's FPS issues will never be fixed because he lives in California. Fair, but look at this. Look at this. For this kind of video, my FPS issues aren't bothering you. I hope. I still think it's better to have an energy tax rather than a device tax. That comes in from Val. Next gen graphics cards are supposed to be like 400 plus watts too. The only laws they have in Arizona are DUI. Arizona can be a little annoying actually with its policy on cameras for speeding. Like the freeways, it'll surprise out of state people in Arizona when they're driving on the freeways and it's like, what? And they get ticketed based on snapshots of their license plate. It's possible that, constitutionality of some of that stuff or legality of some of that has been challenged. But I remember I have family in Arizona. I've been there a fair amount, though not in recent years. And that definitely surprises and gets out of state people that like, oh, this is the thing. They're actually enforcing the speed limit and no one enforces the speed limit on freeways. The speed limit on freeways is like, oh, the speed limit is 65, which means if you're driving on a freeway at nighttime, you should be going at least 70 or 75. No, that is not driving advice. I am not actually saying you should do this. The law is this, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at like nighttime driving, when most of the people out there are professional drivers, truckers, etc., this isn't what happens in most places. What happens is more down here, the 5 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit type thing. And that can surprise people in Arizona. Anyone who disagrees with Temporal is a friend of mine. Okay, Adam. I disagree with Temporal's frame rate drop during reviews and it's not 1080. Yeah, I can try to get that back. I'm not quite sure why it went down to 720, if that was a YouTube change or if that was something when I did some work on my computer, but I can try and get that back. If you leave in California, don't peak. Okay, thank you, Blah. Thank you for the reminder. You live in Phoenix? Okay. Don't talk about Arizona. Greatest state of the union, Temporal. Hey, I have a certain fondness for Arizona. I have family in Arizona. I don't have some strong dislike of Arizona in any way, shape, or form. Rescind every negative statement you've ever made about Arizona. I'm not doing that. Wait, I must be understanding wrong. It's surprising to some people that there's cameras to catch you speeding. Most of us, Crunch, don't live in the second most surveilled, or is it the most? Shoot. I don't remember if it's you guys or China now that have the most cameras per square inch. Like, you guys have an crazy high density of cameras. Like, a crazy high density of cameras compared to the rest of the world. It's you and China fighting for that top spot. It's bad. Yeah, and I-95, if you're not doing 100 miles per hour, you're holding up traffic. Arizona has the worst schools in the country. California's not far behind. Miami, blah. Oh, or Miami's worse? Okay. Okay. So that I think covers it. This was a fun one. You guys got into this. I'm glad we did it. If you guys have any more comments, you can throw them up there now. If you guys are enjoying this content, please do hit that like button. If you're not already subscribed, you can subscribe. And if you really want to be here to get into these comments like the viewers here did, to have your opinions heard, to tell me that I'm terrible, things like that, the best way to do that is to join the Discord in the description below. And in there, you can go ahead and click into the Get Notifications channel, and you can react to get the Watcher role there, and then you'll get Discord ping. So you'll see if we're covering a topic like this, and if this topic is interesting to you, or a future topic is interesting to you, you can be here to comment on it, and that's really fun. Okay. Temporal needs to review the speed cameras. That could be fun. That could be fun. Crunch says everywhere you go, there's a small speed camera and a sign that gives you a smiley face or a sad face depending on your speed. Okay, but do you get a ticket anytime you get a sad face? Do you just automatically get a ticket mailed to you every time you get a sad face, or is it just like a warning to you? Because we have those too, where it'll be like slow down, blinking at you in some places. They're not everywhere, but other states are mostly that. Like you might get a ticket for running a red light by a camera, but they're not going to get a ticket for speeding unless you got hit by a radar, hit by radar from a police officer, a highway patrol, etc. Okay. Temporal needs to review the speed cameras. Adam says Temporal sucks. Thank you, Adam. Nardstorm says Temporal, I'm moving to Texas today, and there is a semi holding up this highway north of Amarillo. Thank you for going live in my time of need. Okay, I hope you're not really driving. I hope you're just listening, not watching. I read most of this out loud to you, so this is definitely listenable too, but please don't take your eyes off the road. The speed cameras are just a syntax since there's no points associated since you were never pulled over. Okay, okay. Usually a warning unless there's a police in a van right around the corner sat bored for like 50 hours. Okay, okay. Okay, I think that's going to do it for now, guys. And Blah asked if I was going to go for another VOD after this. No, I've got evening plans, so I'm going to go do those evening plans. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Oh, and Nardstorm says, Jared Police, Colorado Governor, responding to my brother saying he was disgusted on Twitter, saying his team was looking into fixing this. So maybe Colorado reverses this. Oh, this specific thing. Cool, cool. So your brother said on Twitter that he was disgusted with this not shipping certain gaming PCs thing, and the governor said his team was looking into fixing this. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Cool. Okay, guys, that's going to do it for now, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks. Temporal out.